Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
This episode is brought to you by Pepsi Wild Cherry. Pepsi Wild Cherry is bursting with delicious cherry flavor and a sweet, crisp taste that gives you more to go wild for. Getting wild may look different these days, but whether it's opting for a solo Friday binge watch or a big night out, everyone can indulge in their wild side with Pepsi Wild Cherry. Also available in Zero Sugar. So grab a Pepsi Wild Cherry and get wild.
Duke fans, welcome to episode 580 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. I'm Jason Evans here for your listening pleasure. I'm joined, as I always am, by Donald Wine. Donald, how you doing, my friend?
It's Monday, January 8th. Tonight is a national championship game in football. This is a very, very, very important day. So everybody, I just need, the guys here can see it, but I just need everybody to understand. Go blue.
I like it. I like it. Now, you noticed Donald said the guys, because we are joined. We have a special guest. We've been doing a little bit more of this lately, bringing in other voices, other people to talk with me and Donald. Today, we're joined by a special one, Michael Corey, who was the editor of the Duke Chronicle sports section back in his day. Mike, welcome to the DBR Podcast.
Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Donald. I'm delighted to be here, though not delighted to see Donald wearing Michigan blue, which I have to say is a double Ohio State graduate for my post-undergrad days where we overlapped at Duke. But I'm happy for my friend Donald, and I hope that you lose by just 1 point tonight.
Just no, we can't have this. See, break, timeout. We gotta start over. No, hey. for those of you out there, Michael and I go way back. We were at Duke together. When I was headline monitor, he was the editor of the sports section at the Chronicle, and we've been really good friends since then. We worked a lot together back in those days, so it was great to have Michael on. We separate. We like to bury our hatred for each other's schools in our friendship, but no, it's really good to have him on.
Hey, Mike, tell folks, I mentioned that you were Chronicle sports editors. Just really quick, give folks sort of the history of your Duke fandom and your connection to the basketball team.
Well, I don't think we're going to have enough time for that. I grew up a Duke brat. My father was a 1969 Duke grad. He'd gone there on a full ride after growing up in Charleston, West Virginia. Did miss a game and came into our stadium back before Coach K had arrived, of course. I grew up not knowing any different than being a Duke fan and watching Danny Ferry and Johnny Dawkins, some of my first Duke memories. And I was fortunate enough to get in and matriculate in the fall of 2001 and served as sports editor of the Chronicle in would have been 2003, 2004. Got to attend the 2004 Final Four in San Antonio, where we let UConn beat us, of course. Still
that didn't happen.
No, it didn't. Really didn't.
We were actually sitting like sort of together in that section. Like I remember right. I think there's a picture of us like hugging and crying into each other's arms after the game was over.
Yep, I blacked out, but I'm sure that's right.
By the way, the refs just called another foul on the Duke big man.
Yep,
man, that game.
Daniel Ewan just got a technical.
Yeah, that game was ridiculous.
Yeah. And after my wonderful days at Duke concluded, I got to write a little bit for GoDuke.com and some of the other publications out there, and have tried and failed to write the way that I used to about Duke basketball, but still, of course, follow it and follow all of you and follow DBR meticulously, and am excited about the prospects of Duke basketball going forward.
I love it. All right, so we're going to get to our main task here, which is we're previewing Duke's game against Pittsburgh. This is a road contest, and this is a big deal game. But before we do, guys, I want to just super fast. There's just something I happened to look up and notice today. And this concerns the Notre Dame game that Duke was just in. And I listened to the podcast, Donald, that you and I did on Notre Dame, and I was pretty harsh on the team. I had a lot of criticism of how Duke performed in that Notre Dame game and how some specific players performed. And I was sort of looking at Notre Dame a little bit, and I was like, maybe they aren't as crappy as I thought they were. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I judged Duke a little too harshly for a close win, but a reasonably comfortable win over Notre Dame on the road. I went back and looked. So on December 19th, Notre Dame lost to the Citadel. It was a bad loss.
By 20. Yep.
It's a really bad loss. In the wake of that game, people outside the Notre Dame locker room apparently could hear Micah Shrewsbury, the new Notre Dame head coach, just laying into the team. I mean, really giving it to them and talking about effort and teamwork and playing the way playing with pride. Since that day, Bart Torvik, who's someone who tracks efficiency and all that other kind of stuff, sort of Ken Palm Jr., I guess you'd say, is Bart Torvik. He says that since that game, Notre Dame's been the number 47 team in the country. Yeah. Maybe they aren't that bad. Now, it's a small sample size, only 4 games. But the bottom line is that the Notre Dame that Duke played on Saturday, maybe like nothing like the team that everyone picked to be at the bottom of the ACC. Maybe our narrow win over them wasn't as unimpressive as I first thought.
You mentioned that reporting of Micah Shrewsbury's, fiery message to the team after the game. He had a fiery press conference after that game as well, where he mentioned that I think he kind of borrowed from Deion Sanders' bit. He was basically like, if guys don't want to play the Notre Dame way, play the right way, then I will march them down to compliance and we will get them set up for the portal because they don't need to be here. And it was very rarely do you see coaches call out players like that.
That's some serious message. That's a serious message.
I mean, it was mainly, he was like, hey, this is not up to our standards. And we've had that before, right? It's different when they face the media and say something like that. But, Coach K and I'm sure John Shire behind closed doors have gotten to, their teams and said, hey, look, this is not the Duke standard that we're playing right now. We need to play better. And we need to toughen up. We need to get back to basics, all those little things. And we've talked about, all the various methods that Coach K would use to motivate his team, right? From everything in the locker room with the samurai swords to, holistic and basically doing all these different things to kind of motivate their team. I think when it comes to Micah Shrewsbury, you mentioned, Jason, that since then they're the 47th team in the country. Look, we're in ACC season. And I think everyone who's a Duke fan understands this is going to be the norm. This is going to be the standard. Our standard is whoever we play is going to play like Notre Dame did on Saturday. They're going to come prepared. They're going to come fired up, ready to go. We're going to take everyone's best shot. I know there was some talk on the various forums about how everyone seems to, lay down for UNC, but they don't against us. I don't necessarily care about that. I think that's true in a lot of regard, but it's also, doesn't matter if they lay down for UNC. I don't watch UNC games like that. I don't care about UNC like that. I do care that this team needs to meet the intensity and meet the standard in every game, because if we don't, hey, we either have a rough time like we did against Notre Dame, or a better team can beat us. And we've seen that so far this year too.
What encourages me about the Notre Dame performance is Mark Mitchell. Continuing.
You think? Wait, dude, you think?
Really encouraging.
Yeah. Well, Mike Corey, expert. I'm sorry.
Right? That's what you get for getting a washed-up former amateur journalist coming and weigh in here. His resurgence is very exciting, and Notre Dame does always play us tough, no matter who that coach is, whether it was Bray or now Shrewsbury, and that maybe coupled with the not up to par performance overall that we were hoping for, just getting one of our would-be stars to now become the third leading scorer on the team. Very exciting prospects that can come with that as that cohesive group continues to evolve here. And if it takes a difficult performance against Notre Dame to get there, that's we'll see. We got the win. We'll take it. First ACC win on the road this year, and more to come.
Jason, we're kind of getting off the rails here, but I do want to point out before we get to the preview for Pitt, there was another thing you mentioned, how Notre Dame has played recently. I want to talk quickly about how Kyle Filipowski has been playing, because we've been kind of down on him the last few weeks, right? Like he hasn't played up to what we think he should be living up to as this National Player of the Year candidate and, one of the best players in the country. Now, I was blown away by this when my best friend sent me this morning. Flip's numbers, if you look at his numbers this year, they compare to Paulo Banchero in his freshman year, his 1 year at Duke. Very, 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 very similar. Paulo Banchero had 17.2 points per game, 7.8 rebounds per game, 3.2 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.9 blocks, shot 47% from the floor. Flip, 16.8 points per game, 8.2 rebounds per game, 3.1 assists, 1.4 steals, 1.9 blocks. He actually is statistically better than Paulo Banchero in most categories so far this year. So I say that to say, again, that blew me away because, again, we have rightly been saying, he can do a lot better because we've seen, otherworldly stuff from this guy. But we kind of have to approach it with, hey, in the grand scheme of things, he might be doing okay. So Duke fans who are kind of down on Kyle Filipowski and how he's been playing offensively lately, just know that his stats are compared with some of the, the best, freshmen that we've had around here in the last few years. And we have to compare freshmen because those have usually been the stars of our most recent teams. But hey, he might be doing okay. And if we think he can do better than that, and the answer I think is yes, then man, if he does do better than that, what's the rest of the ACC and the country going to do? Like nothing. So I say that to say, Kyle Filipowski, keep grinding, keep doing your thing. And, when you have that breakout game that we think you're going to have, we're talking 30 points, 25 rebounds, and, a few blocks. And that's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch.
It will be. And maybe it'll come against Pittsburgh because Pitt is a big team. Look, it's time for us to get to our preview. This is the reason we gathered today was to discuss the Pitt Panthers, coached by Jeff Capel, of course. And Donald, the way we always kick off these little discussions about the Duke opponents is you tell us who they've played, how they've done so far. Get us started on that before I go into the Ken Palm deep dive on the statistics.
So the statistics, that's a big word. So for Pitt, the first thing is they're 10-5. They're 1-3 in the ACC. We'll get to that in a second. But right now, they're ranked 54th in Ken Palm. You mentioned teams that have been doing pretty well consistently. And at least maybe the record doesn't show that, but Ken Palm is saying that this team is a very efficient team on the basketball court. They have wins NC State, Binghamton, Florida Gulf Coast, remember Dunk City, Jacksonville. That's a common opponent. We played them the first game of the year. They put up over 100 points against Jacksonville. So this team can score. Oregon State, West Virginia, Canisius, South Carolina State, Purdue, Fort Wayne, and Louisville. Their losses, again, some teams that are actually pretty decent: Florida, Missouri, Clemson, Syracuse, and UNC. Now, they've been reeling a little bit lately, and I think the reason is the losses that they have aren't necessarily the big deals, is how they lost them. And a lot of these games, win or loss, they let the other team come back and kind of take the game from them. Syracuse, they were ahead. They ended up battling back and forth and ended up losing. UNC, they were battling with them. Missouri, they let a lead go super late in the game. In Clemson, they kind of battled back and forth and then just kind of lost the plot at the end. So while we've seen Jeff Capel teams play before, they're very tough, they're very physical. They usually can rebound, as you mentioned, Jason. We'll talk about the metrics, but they don't have a ton of length, but they have some guys that are tall and can stretch the floor a little bit and at least make it where defensively it's tough to score on them. And they want to try and take shots and they want to try and make them. But a lot of them right now are volume shooters, and because of that, they sometimes shoot themselves out of the game. So it'll be interesting to see how they compare to that when they are at home, where they do play demonstrably better than on the road. But that's the rest of the ACC. I think when it comes to Pitt, the physicality of this game is usually what gives us fits when we go up there to play them. And especially with Jeff Capel teams, of course, Jeff Capel knows the Duke program very well and knows how to match up with some of these guys, knows these guys very well. It's going to be a question of matching intensity. And the last couple of years when we have gone to face the Zoo, they have matched that intensity. But we're going to need to do that again tomorrow night.
All right, Donald, Mike, let's get to the analytics, the stats, as they say, on this Pitt program. As Donald, you mentioned, they're number 54 in Ken Palm. They are better defensively than they are offensively, but there's not like a huge gap. I noticed that they play relatively slow, 218th fastest pace in the land. And one reason they play slow, and again, Donald, this is something you alluded to a little bit, but I'm going to really talk about this, is that they are really big. This Pitt team is the 6th tallest team in all of Division I, and they use that length and the size that comes with it to bother shooters and grab rebounds. They're one of the top 10 teams in the country at defensive rebounding. I mean, that's a big deal. You're not going to – Duke has struggled at times getting offensive rebounds this year. It is really hard to get offensive rebounds against this Pitt club. They are elite at protecting the three-point line. Get this, Pitt opponents only hit 27% from three. That's a really low number. That's number 6 in the country. And they're 16th in the country at protecting the rim, at blocking shots. So you're talking about a team that doesn't allow you to make threes, that blocks a lot of shots, that doesn't give up offensive rebounds. I'm frankly surprised. They're number 47 on defense in the country. I'm surprised they're not higher than that. I mean, they're top 10, top 15 in the country at 3 really, really key areas. And the only reason their defense isn't better is because they don't force a lot of turnovers. And there's a weird, just, sticking out there like luck thing about them. Their opponents have hit better than 76% of their free throws. It's like this free throw defense is not a thing. Look, Duke fans, I know that you guys, the grad students, the band, everybody's trying to make noise, but free throw defense is really not a thing. So when I see that Pitt is one of the worst teams in the country at free throw defense, I'm like, that's just bad luck for Pitt. But make no mistake, this is a Pitt team that is very, very good on defense. On offense, they have good ball handlers. They're top 25 in the country at not committing turnovers. So you're not going to get, easy possessions against them. Duke, by the way, is number 6 in the country at not committing turnovers. This is not going to be a game where either team gives up the ball a lot. Pitt does a nice job of grabbing offensive rebounds, top 50 in the country at offensive rebounding. Duke's going to need to protect the glass on the defensive end of the floor, especially from Federico and Guillermo Diaz-Graham, who are their 2 rotating centers. Those 2 guys really get a lot of offensive rebounds. The other thing about Pitt's offense is they're frankly not a very good three-point shooting team, only hitting 33% from deep, even though they love to shoot three-pointers. They have one of the highest three-point shooting rates in the country, even though they only hit a third of them. That's not ideal. They also only hit 68% of their free throws. They're just frankly not a very good shooting team. But they are a team that is decent enough on offense when you combine it with their good defense that they're capable of beating a team like Duke, beating anybody, especially at home.
Jason, the one stat that you mentioned that's kind of like, the bad luck stat, right? The free throw defense, the fact that a lot of teams are making, 77% of their free throws against Pitt. One thing that is interesting about that is that Duke wants to get Pitt into foul trouble. While they do have a large bench, they play 9 guys on average, more than 10 minutes a game. But if anyone has 2 fouls, Jeff Cable's taking them out of the ball game. I think it was 6% of their minutes are with people who have 2 fouls in the first half. So if guys get into foul trouble, Jeff Capel is more than capable of sitting them because he knows he's got bodies to come in. But that also means that you want to be aggressive in getting to the free throw line. I know they're very big. I know they're very tall, but the way you neutralize big men is to get them out of the game. We've seen that happen to us. We had that one game where 5 different, guys that felt like were in foul trouble in the first half, and they all ended up having to sit, and it made our lineup demonstrably smaller. So with Pitt, the way to neutralize and shrink their defense is to get some of the big men out of the game. That is going to require our big men, one, to stay out of foul trouble. On our end, we do play more guys with 2 fouls, but that's because we have to a little bit more than Pitt does. But if Pitt gets those guys out of the game, then it opens up the floor quite a bit and also makes Pitt play a little bit more timid, which is where a lot of those defensive holes will come in.
All right, we're gonna bring in Mike Corey, by the way. Again, in just a moment. I promise you, Mike, but we're going to take a quick commercial break. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk about some specific players on Pitt, who to watch out for, who are the big threats on this team, and we're going to hear more from Mike about his time as Chronicle sports editor. All that's coming at you just a second.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
We are back from the break, and we're going to talk a little bit about the players on this Pitt ball club. Donald, I'm betting that you're going to talk to me a little bit about Blake Henson. But before you do, I want to mention something else. They got a couple freshmen this year who are really good. I've watched Pitt play a couple times, and I've come away very impressed with their two freshmen. The really impressive one is Carlton Bub Carrington. Bub Carrington, man, this dude is a player. He's averaging 14.6 points per game, 5.3 rebounds per game, and 5.0 assists per game. Donald, he averages a 10.55. We talk about the 10.55. He averages one. Guy is 6'5". He leads the team in minutes played. He's a true freshman. Now, he's not a great shooter yet, but man, I think Bud Carrington is going to be a big-time player at some point in his career. And get this, dudes, did you see how he started his career? The very first game of his career, they played NCANT. Kid's a freshman, starting point guard, opening game. He had a triple-double in his first game of his career. Wow. I mean,
I hear those things are good.
Yeah.
I hear you want to have those.
Yeah. It was really impressive that this kid had a triple-double on his first game of his career. He does it all for them. His head's always on his head's always on a swivel. He's looking for the pass. He makes some great passes. Duke is going to have their hands full with Bud Carrington. And then the other freshman, I just wanted to quickly mention this guy. When Bud Carrington is not playing point guard, they got a guy named Jalen Lowe who is playing point guard. Jalen Lowe is very long, very rangy. He's just hitting 27% of his three-pointers, but I saw him a little bit in high school, and he can hit the three, but he is a guy who does a great job of, like, he's got a great dribble. He's got really long arm. He probes the defense. He gets off shots at sort of strange angles because he has these long arms. I'm telling you, these two freshmen are really, you haven't heard of these guys because they're brand new, and neither one of them are like McDonald's All-Americans. They're like top 100 freshmen, but not like top 20. Both these guys, both Bud Carrington and Jalen Lowe, you're going to know their name after Duke plays them tomorrow night. Donald, give me more on some of the other players.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when it comes to Carrington, he complements Blake Hinson very well. Everyone should be familiar with Blake Hinson. He's been one of the best players in the ACC since he came to Pitt. He's doing everything this year. 6'8" senior, 19.1 points per game, 4.8 rebounds per game. And he's the one guy on this team that can shoot threes. He's shooting almost 41% from three this year. So there's a couple of guys who are in that range, but Blake Hinson is commanding a lot of their offense. He's very physical. He can get to the lane. He can, again, shoot from outside. He kind of does it all. And he also is able to get into the flow of the offense and really terrorize a team and take over a game. There was a time, I think it was a couple of years ago, where we played him and he, in the second half, just had like 20 points, it felt like, in the second half. We ended up winning that game, but it was, he really kept them in it because of the fact that he was able to kind of put Pitt on his back and carry them as far as he could before it just ended up being just short. Mike, I want to bring you in because I think when it comes to Blake Hinson, I know you've watched some games with him before. Who would you like to see guard Blake Hinson? I know he's going to be probably lining up maybe with Mark Mitchell, but is that the right one in your mind, or you think, is there someone else out there that you would like to see maybe get some minutes, and even include somebody on the bench that you would want to see kind of come off and maybe spell Mark Mitchell for a couple minutes?
Yeah, I'd love to wear him out by throwing Mitchell first and then Ryan Young at him, and let Young's physicality and experience and girth just wear this guy down. He's easily the leading scorer in this team, and though Pitt's won some games where he hasn't performed at the same clip, I'd love to neutralize him as much as I can with Mitchell's and Ryan's length and size, and just be his shadow all over the court, and make the other guys in this team beat you. I would love for that to be the case. And This was always a hallmark of Coach K's teams, and I know Shire's got the same approach. Let's make the non-stars beat us. Now, Hinson's had some. Sorry, go ahead. Hinson's had some games where he's really. He had 27 points in a couple of games earlier in the year. He can really fill it up when he's rolling. But I think if we can throw that length and size at him, we can shake him up a little bit.
Mike, I'm so glad you brought that up because I was looking at what Blake Hinson's done game by game this season, and he had a 5-game run. You were talking about it there. Folks, check these numbers out. So against Missouri, he went for 22 points. He was 5 of 8 on 3-pointers. Next game, Clemson, 27 points. He was 6 of 10 on 3-pointers. Next game, West Virginia, 29 points, 9 of 15 on threes. I mean, dude was firing. Next 2 games, he scored 26 and 19 points against Canisius and South Carolina State. He was 3 of 4 on threes in each one of those games. So over that 5-game stretch where he was scoring like 25 plus points per game in several of those games, he was 26 of 41 on 3-pointers, better than 63%. I mean, wow. But here's the big but. They've played 4 games since then. Blake Hinson is 6 of 31 on 3-pointers in the 4 games since then. That's just 19%, including going 2 of 11 against Carolina last week. So he is a guy, when he gets hot, it carries on for several games, and it is scary. But he has been cold lately. And I hope he's, like I said, he was super hot for 5 games. He's been cold for 4 games. Please let it be a 5th game. Because if Blake Hinson is on fire, it is a huge problem for Duke. Because that guy, he can be unstoppable on the perimeter, and he is not afraid to take 10 plus 3-pointers if he's hitting them.
Especially with our inconsistent threes, right? It's one thing if we're going back and forth and he's hitting a 3, we're hitting a 3, and we're kind of neutralizing him that way. Yeah, you get your 9 threes off. That's fine. We're hitting 10. That's fine. But we have not proven to be able to hit the 3 consistently well. I mean, not even from half to half, right? Like we had the game against Syracuse where we didn't make one in the first half, and then we made all of them in the second half. And then we had the game against Notre Dame where we were sort of cold. Once again, we kind of regressed back to our mean in from beyond the arc. But I think the thing about Hinson is also when you're at home, and especially I've been to Pitt, a game there. When the zoo gets going, the zoo gets going. It can get very loud and get very intimidating. They're kind of like us around the court. But that gym as a whole can get loud. Momentum is a cold-hearted person, and when you're in the zoo and dude is just hitting 3 after 3 after 3, that momentum can build. You don't want that to happen.
Well, and this is going to be his last game against Duke at home, so he's going to be particularly motivated and focused on this one. You can't get focused for North Carolina. Nobody cares about beating North Carolina, but he's going to be real focused for beating Duke and his coach's former school when they come to town.
I like that, Mike. Hey, guys, just really quickly, I want to talk about the big men, Federico, and the Diaz-Graham twins. By the way, as I mentioned earlier, Federico and Guillermo Diaz-Graham do not play together like at all. Like those guys, literally, they are splitting the center position. But the other Diaz-Graham twin does play with them. Yeah. Does play with them sometimes, and that's a really big lineup when they do that. That's like a pair of 7-footers on the floor together. And it's worth noting that the Diaz-Graham twins have begun really stepping outside and taking 3-pointers. That's something I was watching one of their games, and they were out there on the perimeter a lot. I was like, damn, you know what? I didn't realize that they were going to be doing that.
Guillermo was going to do that more than Jorge does, but you're right. Jorge will do the mid-range, free throw line type of step out. He's not going to go not all as much as Guillermo. He's not going to go all the way out to 3-point line, but Guillermo can shoot it and he can hit it. He's not going to hit 90%, but I say that now and he probably will because that's how things have been going lately. But I think when it comes to him, he wants to bring the big men out because if he can hit one, that token 3, if he can, or at least make it where it looks good, that just makes our big men have to trend out even further. That opens the lane for a lot of their guards to shine.
Yeah, and the reason I bring them up and the amount of size is because it does present an interesting problem for Duke potentially with, what we do defensively. This Duke team, for the most part, and we can kind of transition our conversation now more toward Duke and away from Pitt, but for the most part this year, I feel like Duke has played smaller versus bigger. We talked, Donald, you and I talked last game. We did a little bit of Flip and Young at the same time. I don't know that we're going to see a lot of that, but this is the kind of game where you might see some of it. Mike, you alluded to, Ryan Young potentially guarding Blake Hinson and trying to, cause Blake Hinson a little bit of troubles with his physicality. That would be the circumstance where you would see something like that. I just feel like it's going to be tougher for Duke to play smaller. I think that, it would be a challenge, I think, for Duke to go to one of those 4-guard lineups that John Shire has experimented with a pretty fair bit this year against Pitt, because I think Pitt's just going to destroy you on the boards if you do that, and they're going to create problems for you with their size, because this Pitt team is one of the bigger teams that Duke will face all year.
I think also you think about our rotations thus far, right? When you talk about the big men, you have Ryan Young coming off the bench, you have TJ Power. We didn't see Sean Stewart this last game, but like he's available. And one guy who you may have wanted to count on in this game to kind of like get a couple fouls or something like that is Christian Reeves. And Christian Reeves has been hurt, most of the year. It doesn't seem like he's, imminently returning. So when you think about that, that almost lends itself to the fact of why we've been trending smaller, is because we have 6-7 guys on the wing that are perfectly capable of being in the game at the same time. And we only have a couple of guys who can really bang down low. I mean, really bang down low. So that's why you've seen sometimes when Flip was out of the game that our guy in the middle was Mark Mitchell, because he was the, guy on the court that was most capable of getting down there and grinding in the paint and getting rebounds, which we've seen him do well in the last week or so. So it's going to be an interesting thing, especially when you say when Federico, not Federico, when the Diaz twins come in, and together, if they play together. Because again, that just will force us to have to play Flip and Ryan, or Ryan and somebody else, or Flip and somebody else. This is where I hope we see Sean Stewart come in and use his athleticism, because that is going to be necessary. And especially again, if there's a foul trouble situation, then we're going to need to utilize him more. So hopefully the fact that he didn't play on Saturday means he's just as ready as ever for tomorrow night, because we're going to need him.
Yeah, this is going to be one of those games where it's going to be chess. Who can bend the other team to their will strategically? And I'd love to see our perimeter attacking the basket strong and drawing those fouls to the big men and not altering their shots against this superior length. And I think we have the weapons to do that. I think we have the guys that can break down Pitt's defense, their perimeter off the dribble, and get into the paint and draw some fouls. Because as you noted, we're not going to be getting a lot of rebounds and getting second chances. And if we can stretch the court and get some threes and make them play a little bit more honestly, and then attack the basket and attack those holes. I mean, it's not rocket science, but I think that's the kind of strategy where we can make Capel adjust as opposed to us having to adjust to him.
I'll say this about Duke's rotations in this game. I think it's going to be very tough for TJ Power to get minutes. A team as physical as Pitt is a bad matchup for him already. And the odds are pretty good that if he's in there, it means that Mark Mitchell probably isn't in the game. And that probably means that TJ Power it either means that Duke's in a zone, in which case Blake Hinson's probably going to be shooting over that zone left and right, or it means that TJ Power is the guy who's forced to guard Blake Hinson. That's a matchup I do not like for Duke.
I wonder if that zone you talk about, like we had a more traditional zone the other night when TJ Power was in the game. I wonder if it becomes not necessarily a box and one, but more of a matchup-ish type of zone where you have a guy that's on Blake Hinson the whole time and he gets passed, from defender to defender, but the rest of the guys kind of stay in their zone. Usually, I mean, with a zone, you kind of do that. You kind of, you don't necessarily are not on the guy, but you're marking a guy saying this guy's in my area. I'm responsible for him. But, a matchup zone kind of forces you to play a man-ish type of defense until someone else relieves you from that particular part of the zone. So I could see that, not for long stretches, but I could see TJ Power come in the game and they move to a zone where Blake Hinson is taken care of throughout the thing. And Jason, this is where, he's on the perimeter. We said it the last few times, right? Put Jalen Blakes on that dude and let him be a pest, and at least make it where he gives up the ball and let somebody else beat us.
I like it. By the way, Ken Pomeroy predicts Duke wins this game 75-71. That's only a 4-point margin. That should tell all of you out there what a tough game this is going to be. By the way, I think it's a really important game because this is a game against a team, in the upper middle of the ACC standings, and it's a road game. This is the kind of game easy to lose. I won't be shocked at all if Duke loses this game. But if you get this win in your column, that's super important for a team like Duke, trying to make up for the bad loss we have to Georgia Tech. I can't even tell you how many people I talk to who go, at the end of the year when Duke doesn't win the ACC, we will all look back on that Georgia Tech game. This is the kind of thing that could make up for that.
And also, we've talked about Pitt being 54th in KenPom. They're 53rd in the net rankings. So again, when we talk about, this is a team that
quad one,
the quad one is a quad one game, but we also won it where, after we obviously want to win, but this is the team that we want to stay strong throughout the season, because this is the type of game that when people look back, they go, oh man, they went to Pitt and won. If Pitt kind of stays at the level that they are and kind of continues to be you're right there at the upper middle portion of the ACC, this can be a really good opportunity for us to pull out a win that will help our seeding down the road.
Hey, Mike, before we go, I promised this. Let's talk really quick. I want to hear a little bit more about your time as Chronicle sports editor. Yeah, start with this. Give me your best story. What's your best, covering Duke basketball kind of story?
So it actually gets away from the coverage a little bit, but I'll tell you two stories. The first is the real perk of being the Chronicle sports editor used to be you get to sit down with Coach K in the spring, and you get to publish the Q&A in the summer issue of the Chronicle. And I had the pleasure of doing that, and we had a great conversation over the course of 30 or 60 minutes. It felt like a lifetime of goodness for me. And about a month later, I walked into the gym, and Coach K was coming out. And I didn't want to embarrass myself or embarrass him and go fawn over him. I just assumed he didn't remember who I was, but he was very nice, came up to me and he said, Mike, how you doing? I said, I'm great, Coach. How are you? And he said, you look good. Have you been working out? And I said, yeah, Coach, I have been. Thank you for noticing. I have been exercising. And he said, so are you ready? And I said, ready for what? And he said, well, I'm down some guys. I could use some walk-ons. And I'm a lifelong Coach K and Duke fan. This is blowing my mind. And before I could even say anything, he's like, you could never make my team. And he cackles to himself and walks off.
Of course he's going to remember your name. You have the same name as him. So
exactly. We're related, And, yeah. And I had met him when I was in kindergarten. It was my dad's 25th college reunion, and we had walked in somewhere for breakfast. It was probably Omo's. And he was sitting over there. My dad was too embarrassed. He sent me over with an envelope, and I got his signature. Michael, always try your best, which I know he always signed everything. And I had brought that up during our interview, and I should have said, Coach, I would have tried my best trying out for your team. You should have given me the chance. I could have done something. My second best Coach K story is when we had the privilege of breaking the news that he was not going to take the Lakers job. I was still on campus. We were in the middle of summer, and we had caught wind of this flirtation with the Lakers. And we were working our butts off trying to find out what he was thinking, what he was going to do. Was it a power play with the new president at the time? It was President Broadhead had just started. And all indications were that it was a sincere consideration. And we started calling all of the parents of the players through our network of relationships that we had. And we got one of the parents, I think it was the Melchiones or the McClures, had told us, Coach K just got off the phone with us and he's going to stay. And we got to break that news, and CNN put in its little ticker, Duke Chronicle report, Coach K is staying.
Nice.
We were thrilled about that. At the time, that was before social media had really taken off, so that was as good as we could do. But I remember being so struck after the fact when I had talked to him and some of his circle about what really had appealed to him. And you might all remember that a letter written by a guy named Andrew Humphreys got real popular because it was like a personal note from Andrew to Coach about staying. And that had actually meant a lot to him. It was a strong illustration of what connected him to the university. But I remember being so struck by what the then associate AD, Chris Kennedy, had told me. Coach K loved so much helping these young people come in as young people and go out as men. And that that was not necessarily reflected in a lot of the fawning coverage at the time. He wanted to be an educator still, and I was affected by that all the way after, and was so I'm hoping that he's able to do that now still. But those were my two sharpest memories from the Chronicle days, of many. It was a wonderful sprint over 18 months, sitting in 301 Flowers.
I want to ask you another quick question, but before I do that, I don't know if you guys saw this. You mentioned, him being able to stay and be an educator of men. I don't know if you saw this, but the other day, Howard was able to practice at Duke because they were playing NC Central, and then we're going down to South Carolina for a game, and Duke graciously let them stay in town and practice, and Coach K got to say some words to them. Of course, Kenny Blakeney, friend of the podcast, and coach of Howard, was able to make that happen. But it's interesting that that's still available, right? That's a very big deal. The fact that he's no longer the coach, but that's still kind of a tool that's available for just so many people. And I think that's terrific that they're able to make that work while he has kind of removed himself from the program to let it be John Shire's program. So I just want to make that aside. But the one thing you mentioned, how we were at school, social media, Facebook had just started when I graduated. So you had kind of a year of the early days of Facebook on campus. Looking now at how the Chronicle is able to reach millions of people, what would you have taken from this time? What would you have loved to have in your time as the sports editor that would have made your coverage either that much more broad? And social media could be the answer, but what would you have taken from the tools that they have today and say, man, if I had this would have made our coverage even that much better?
All of them. I mean, the big breakthrough for us, the big ambition for us that became a breakthrough, was that we wanted to use our presence on the web and start publishing on the web directly, and not just publishing in the paper, because we knew there was this massive audience out there that if we could just reach them and get them to come to our website, that we could be more than just college journalists for other college students. And the good folks at DBR were generous enough to give us space on the bottom of, I think, their main page, and it said Chronicle links, and they would list our top 5 stories or most recent stories. And that drove our visits up tremendously. And I'm sure it's paltry compared to what it's at now, but man, what a tool just that alone was, because DBR was the hub and still is, obviously, for Duke basketball. The other thing that would have been dramatically different now, and I'm actually very curious as to how it works, is the process of engaging with a student athlete, especially a basketball player, was very laborious, and you had to go through sports information. You had a dedicated time and place, and you could only ask questions for so much time. And now the athletes are churning out information and perspectives and ideas and content of their own all of the time. It's just so much more fodder for stories and ideas for stories that we could have had no way of having back then, aside from just hitting the pavement and getting to know the players and stories that might be out there. One of my favorite stories that I got to write when I was at the Chronicle was about Andre Buckner. And it was just through talking to folks and listening and trying to get a sense of his story and his purpose as a basketball player. You could get that now through social media engagement and the relationship building you can do there with the athletes, the people around them. Let me tell you one more story, if I may. Great. One of my very, very favorite people to cover was Luol Deng. He was just one of the most fascinating people that I'd ever gotten to meet in college. And I'm going to speak a little bit out of turn, but I have never been friends with him. I've only had indirect conversations with him or asking him questions, but I got to know some of the friends that he had around him. And he and his friends are doing some really interesting community work now. And just out of the blue, I'm in a position where I can support them the littlest bit through a relationship that I got to build on the ground 20 years ago. God, I'm old. And that's the kind of thing that I bet happens a lot more organically now because of social media, that college journalists can take advantage of and utilize in a way that the professional journalists can't.
Yeah, and you mentioned Lil Ding. He just had one of his friends now works for Duke and reached out to me about an event that he was having for his foundation in Chicago, like a few weeks back. So yeah, that sort of thing. It keeps everybody connected, right? Like for those of you out there, when I was headline monitor, Michael Corey was the sports editor, and there was usually no communication or very little communication between those two people, those two positions at campus. And because we knew each other, really well, and we realized we were in this position, we were able to fix some things about how people got information about Cameron. We came up with this idea that I would just call him and say, hey, we have 300 spaces left in Cameron. We have 200 spaces left. And he just had a ticker running on the website. And you talk about the utilization of social media and the internet to kind of bring people together. That was the early days. And I mean, now you could just tweet out, yo, there's space, and people can show up.
Yeah.
These guys have it easy now, but that sort of thing, you had to come up. It's why we're so blessed to be Duke alums. We all came up with weird ideas that worked at the time to bring people together for something that we all love. And honestly, that's why we're all here, right? Like Jason and I didn't know each other when we started this thing, but we're really close now. And we talk just about every day about Duke basketball. Michael and I have been talking Duke basketball for, as he said, 20 years, plus 20 years plus. So it's great to kind of get that perspective of how it used to be and what we can learn from that to kind of make our fandom increase ever more as we, as you say, get older.
All right, guys, I'm going to call it. We've been on long enough. We're wrapping up episode 580 of the DBR podcast. Our thanks to Mike Corey, for joining us, former Chronicle sports editor, giving us some interesting perspective. I am Jason Evans. He is Donald Wind. You can hear them now in the background. Is that them? Yes, it's the Duke Band. They're playing us out and taking us home.
No, listen, I'm so happy for you, Donald.
I hope everything is happy tonight. We're living in uncharted territory right now.
I really think you're going to kick their butts. I really do.
I'm going up to Detroit on Thursday I don't have a ticket to the Lions game, but I'm going anyway. We'll see what happens.
Just go there and be like, I'm Donald Wine, and people will give you tickets.
Yeah, but they say, yes, Donald Wine, you give me $567.
Yeah.
trying to get the price of the brick to come down a bit, but
no, it is a good time to be a Michigan football fan. This week is like probably the best week to be a Michigan. I mean, the entire state of Michigan, pro and college. Yeah. Best week like in history.
I don't know about history. I mean, both teams had history back in the day.
You're playing for a national title and you're in the NFL playoffs. How much better?
Last time the Lions won a playoff game, Michigan won the Rose Bowl and almost had to share the national championship. So we live at good times. We eating nice.